That's exactly it. I need to be here with you guys and with you, Christy, drinking amazing whiskey.
Exactly. So what's been your highlight in the last 3 weeks? What have you been doing? Have you been drinking anything good?
My highlight was going up to Speyside, actually. That was an amazing trip. Went up with Royal Salute, which was awesome. And we went down to Strathyler. And it was awesome. Great trip. There's some amazing whiskey. Tried their brand new 26-year-old, and it was a really cool trip. So probably my whiskey highlight.
That is amazing. I'm not jealous at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
What about yourself?
I've had quite a few highlights.
No need to rub it in.
No. Not only whiskey ones, really. I did a WSET wine course. I feel like I've been cheating on whiskey. There we go.
Is it? How's that going?
Well, I passed with distinction.
Oh, of course you did. Yeah.
So it's good. I'm very pleased, and it was actually really good. So we all love flavour here at Pour and Sip. We wouldn't be involved if we didn't. So I really would recommend it if anyone drinks, is a fan of the grape as well as the grain.
Very much.
Check out WSET. And welcome to everyone. We want to know what you've been up to. Well, we have a sneak peek. We've got some intel about what some people have been up to, which is very exciting.
Yes, some of our lovely Pour and Sippers decided to get together at Milroy Spitalfield. Soho, actually, the other day. I've made that mistake before. I turned up to the wrong Milroy tasting and then had to run over to the other one. But yeah, it was definitely Soho. So I hope you guys all had an awesome time. I think Ian Cook sent me a picture and it looked really cool. So I'm just hoping that's something we can definitely do in the future. And next time, hopefully, I'll be able to come.
Yeah, again, not jealous at all. I wish I could have been there because it sounded like a lot of fun. And I hope a lot of excellent drams were had. If you were there, let us know what you tasted and how it was.
Let us know what the best dram you tasted. But I think now the world's moving back to normal. Hopefully, more of these kind of meetups will be starting to happen. Pour and Sippers will be getting together more often. We got loads of comments coming in, by the way, already. You guys are really excited about tonight. Green tea is green, absolute regular. Canada, Finland, and Israel, very intriguing. The last Israeli whiskey we had on here, I bought from the store. Chris Dagnan, evening. Sean McCarrick, good evening, everyone. Interesting selection tonight. Anthony Mullins, evening all. The Pomegranate Cask one is interesting for me. Alistair Taff, evening all. Jim Brannigan, hi from York. Hello. 3 new ones on me, so looking forward to the drams. God, you guys are loads of you here tonight. Sean McCarrick, I bought all 3 10 minutes ago and have moved 2 of the bottles to have a look and then couldn't remember which went with which glass. If my tasting comments seem a little wild tonight, that is maybe that's something for you to do. You could try and really kind of work out, looking at the tasting notes now, which ones are which, and maybe thinking color wise maybe or something like that, and you can kind of try and regain that.
It's a good game, I think, like an actual blind tasting. I mean, color-wise, they all look pretty similar to me. So I think you might, I think the lightest one is first, possibly. But just to say, welcome if it's your first tasting, because obviously it's our first box of April. Got the box right here. So if you're joining us for your first live, welcome. This is so exciting. Let us know. We love to hear from you. So our Pour and Sip tastings were very chatty. We love to talk about drams. We love to chat with each other. We've got 3 guests this evening, a guest for every dram, which is unreal. I love it so much. Get very excited about these evenings. And let us know. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Drop your tasting notes. Drop your questions for our guests, because that's super important. I always feel super honoured to have people from the distilleries, people from the brands, people who know so much. So send all your questions. The more, the merrier.
Definitely. And there's no tasting notes too silly. Please just get involved as much as possible. I feel bad to feel the new guys thinking, they're already meeting up already. I've missed out on so much. I'm so behind. But it's not like that. Please get involved. Everybody is super friendly here in the comments. And please ask any question you want to ask. I can see Ian Jamborain telling me here, no, it was Spitalfields. Yep, sorry. It was definitely, no, it was Spitalfields. Oh, okay, I see. Not Soho. So yeah, 2 great bars in London. If anyone does want to try whiskey in a whiskey bar, Milroy's and Soho and Spitalfields is awesome. Reverend Kevin,
that's a good question, actually. Like, I want to hear your whiskey bar recommendations this evening. So, as well as tasting the whiskies, do you drop us? I can see your Uncle Vanya says he recommends giving the Bow Bar a try too. I don't know where that is, but yeah, please let us know, because I think that's good intel for everyone in this group to know where to drink good drams.
Yeah, absolutely. And for different areas as well. I can only really give you London for the time being, but the Melody Whiskey Bar is one of my absolute favourite haunts in London. That guy's got some unbelievable selection with outrageous pricing in a good way. Sadly, Stephen Coleman Williams can't be here this evening, being reported by Reverend Kevin Wright. So you Pour and Sippers are now letting us know which one of the others can't come on. So that is great. Joe F., the best dram of the night was an Octomore 10.4 at Milroy's. Wow. Ooh. I hope you finished with that dram, Joe, because I'm not sure anything else is going to taste of anything after an Octomore. So yes, and Ian Jamboree Milroy's was great. Had a 14-year-old Aaron Private cask from Whiskey Exchange. Carl Moore, 16-year-old Bunnahaven Sherry, but both superb. They sound amazing. Bo Bar was an answer to an Edinburgh question. So there you go.
There we go. Amazing. So a bit of admin before we start, and then we'll kick off because, you know, we've got 3 guests to get through, so we need to speed it up. So 3 drams of tasting tonight. We're starting off with Milk and Honey, and we've got Tal from the distillery to chat to us, which is fabulous. It's honestly one of my favourite places to visit. It was amazing, and we'll chat all about that very shortly. Then Andy, you've got the joy of Dave Worthington for Boutique Whisky for a trip to Finland.
Yes.
And then last but not least, we're going to hop over the pond to Canada, and I'm going to chat to another Dave about all things Pike Creek. So ready your tasting glasses, ready the drams, and I think we should crack on.
Let's do it.
Everyone ready? Let's bring in Tal. Let's welcome him to the stage. Hi there, Tal. How are you doing?
Hello. Well, I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. It's so good to see your face. It has been a long time, but it's so great that we get to catch up now.
It looks like the last 2 years just, scratched out of the calendar. And it was like ages ago, but I think we just saw you in Israel. So it's kind of a weird time.
Nothing major happened in those 2 years either. It's kind of nothing in the world really happened. Just kind of passed by very quickly.
There's nothing between the 2 times I met Christy, nothing happened.
Exactly.
Nothing at all. Right, Andy, do dram along and we'll catch you in a bit. Enjoy the whiskey. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Oh, I cut him off. I always do this. It's a bit like a running joke now. Andy says bye, and I'm like, bye. See you later. But Tal, so you were joining us from Milk and Honey, which is Tel Aviv's whiskey distillery. And there's so much that I want to talk to you about, and I want to reminisce, and I want to get really stuck in. But first of all, before I do this, tell us a bit about you. Tell us about your role at the distillery, and tell us about your career in whiskey.
So I'm the oldest guy at the distillery. That means that everyone is much younger than me. They're coming to. You saw the parking lot. It's mostly bicycles and all kinds of electric scooters. So most of the guys are young there. We are a young distillery and an urban one. I've been in the whiskey business for, I think, something around over 20 years.
Wow.
But from the other side, I used to work for Diageo. I used to come and visit distilleries, work a little bit in distilleries, and then conducting whiskey tastings where you get killed at 36 or 40 degrees outside in Israel, which is not the best. Highland dress and Mediterranean weather is not the best fit.
No. I feel like, that could get quite warm quite quickly, quite sticky quite quickly.
Exactly. You remember the weather.
I remember, yes. And this is so exciting. So again, there's so much to talk about the weather with Milk and Honey's whiskey and climate, being a geography geek. But tell us a bit about how the distillery got set up, when you started it, and kind of like the philosophy and whiskey making approach that you guys have.
So, that sometimes, let's say like 5 guys are sitting in a bar, drinking too much, and then saying, let's open the best bar in the world. So it kind of happened to us, but then we decided to open the distillery. So actually, the guys blame me for that. I think that I was probably doing one of the whiskey tasting for the Diageo single malts, and the guys fell in love with whiskey, and they started to bring one of the guys that was working with them in the high-tech industry. Most of the guys came from the high-tech industry. Israel is a kind of high-tech nation, and they told him, you're brewing at home from time to time. I said, so let's do that. Let's distill at home. So he understood that distilling at home can never lead to anything that is better. But between that and where we are today, but this is Gal Kalkstein, the founder and the owner. So I was there at the first meeting, and I came back 4 years ago, and Gal, when he decided and he sat down and thought about opening a distillery, he said, okay, I want to be the best. I want to be a pioneer. So I'm going to open the first whiskey distillery in the most impatient nation in the world, an impatient country in the world like Israel, and then we're going to hire the best people for that. And we started from that and just climbed all over.
I love this. I love this story so much. And I'm gonna like just talk about this non-stop because I loved this visit. Like when I got to visit you guys, it was amazing. So when you say an urban distillery, you guys, I think sometimes when people think of distilleries, it's like the Scottish Highlands and rolling hills. You are in the center of a really vibrant city. The nightlife is phenomenal. The nightlife was so great. I lost my voice by the end of the trip. I don't know if you remember. I literally could not speak. And I feel like the culture in Tel Aviv is so rich around food and drink and flavor. And I'm wondering how that immersion in flavor really impacts what you're doing with the whiskey.
So I think it's all combined together because you're always looking for your DNA, and we are hectic. We're always thinking, we're always doing, we're always moving. And you saw the city. It's like a beehive. And it's like that. You by the way, when you lost your voice, you remember you're talking about, before that, we were talking about whiskey bars. You remember the last whiskey bar we were in? It was crazy in Tel Aviv. So yeah, I think if you look at what is Milk and Honey, or what we call ourselves today, M&H. Yeah. By the way, it's because people thought we're making Baileys or something like that with milk and honey.
I can see maybe M&H.
So Tel Aviv is a mix. The whole country is a mix, but Tel Aviv is a mix. Tel in Hebrew is old city ruins, and Aviv is spring. So it's old and everything is new in the spring. It's old and new. And this is the name of the city. So in a nutshell, this is what we're doing. We decided to follow the Scottish regulation of the traditional regulations and produce whiskey in a traditional way. But then, so that means just barley, 100% malted barley. We do a double distillation with the copper pot stills, and we age for 3 years and 1 day minimum. But then we are thinking outside the box and thinking about crazy stuff. And actually, I was in London 2 weeks ago because we won the World Whiskey Awards, the Brand Innovators of the Year.
Congratulations!
But what was so great for us that we are a brand, not only the Brand Innovator of the Year, we are actually a brand. So yeah, I think you can have all of this in our whiskeys. One of them, which we're going to taste tonight. But not only that, the mix of you talked about the food and the culture. It's the whole mix. It's us we're Jews that came from all over the world. My mother's from Bulgaria. My father was from Ukraine. My wife's father's from Iraq, and her mother's from Berlin. So just think about dinner. And
oh my gosh, food! That must be a banquet.
and of course, the local Mediterranean, Middle Eastern food. The whole thing together creates a very amazing Israeli cuisine, and I think it's actually booming all over the world in the last few years. So it's all, in a nutshell, this is us.
Yes, no, I love it. And one more question before I will read out some tasting notes, because people have jumped ahead, but I'll let you off because I'm struggling to resist. Something that I loved when I went to visit you was how you guys really worked with the climate. And one of the experiments you talked about, which I really have been like sweating to ask you, was maturing casks at the Dead Sea because of the humidity, the salinity, and that there's nowhere else on earth like it. So tell us a bit about that. How does that affect whiskey?
So first of all, even in Tel Aviv, it's hot and humid most of the year, and summer can go up to, mostly it's 36, but it go up to 40. But it's very humid in the summer, as you remember. It's like walking in the soup outside, 70 to 80 to 90 degrees, 90% humidity. So even in Tel Aviv, you have a very fast maturation, around 11% angel share yearly. But then when our first consultant and master distiller, Dr. Jim Swan, the late Dr. Jim Swan, fell in love with this project, was the 5 climate zones. We have 5 climate zones in 450 kilometers from top to bottom. Yeah. So that means that we can experiment a lot in 2 hours drive. And the Dead Sea is really crazy. I think when you were in Israel, we just had very young stuff from there. And we just launched the second edition. By the way, we had the worst timing ever. We finally launched the whiskey at the beginning of 2020, and then the world shut down. So we just were waiting for the next to the cask. Just get old. Dead Sea can go up to 50, 55 degrees in the summer. Very dry. very dry. Lots of minerals in the air. I'm not sure it's salty. Some of the people get some salty notes in the whiskey, but I'm not sure the air is salty because there's not a lot of air spray. The water is kind of oily. It's very heavy. You can never sink there. You just float because of I think they have 45% salt inside the water. But then you have another effect, which is the air pressure, because the Dead Sea is minus 428 meters below sea level. It's the lowest place on Earth.
Yeah.
And when you get the air pressure, so it gets the liquid even more inside the wood. So you have much more wood effect. Sometimes we are very afraid that we get over matured in a year.
Yeah.
So and of course 25% angel share, which is crazy. So what we do is 1.5 year in the Dead Sea and 1.5 year in Tel Aviv. We just move the casks back, but it's still. We did some blind tasting at the World Whiskey Show last year in London, and people from the industry were sure that it's a 16, 18-year-old single malt Scotch. Yeah. It was a 3-year-old in 2 days or something like that. But
I love it, and I actually think when we were there, and please tell me if I remember this wrong, I think we tasted a very young cask sample of the pomegranate wine finish. Yeah. So I can't wait to taste this and see how it's grown up, which is amazing. Before we get on, because I really, really need to drink this whiskey with you, I'm just going to read out a handful of tasting notes. We've got loads of people tuning in. We've got Shilton has joined us, and he says hello to you. Pretty sure that you know him. He's like, great to see you. Say hello to Shilton.
Shilton just moved from Hut to Hutter, from Paul John to Milton Honey at the beginning of the year. So, yeah.
This is amazing. So we've got Ian Jambo-Rain. Lovely nose on this. For the ABV, it's not overpowering. Sweet and fruity. Malcolm Tucker, I'm so glad that I opened this early. Opened this straight out of the bottle. So I get plastic and apple and now getting chocolate with fruit. And I think that's some of the high alcohol. Sometimes it can be quite volatile at the start. Jen, it doesn't smell like 59%. It smells sticky fruit, which is the pomegranate, which is amazing. Chris Randall, I can smell sweet oranges wrapped in soft leather, which is great. And that's some of the cask influence, those leather notes. We've got Yoza, sweet smelling and fruity. Pesho, you can taste the ABV. David Stanton, nose, pomegranate, vanilla, roasted coffee, butterscotch, and freshly baked apple. Reverend Kevin Wright, I'm trying not to imagine the pomegranate, but it's really there. And then we've got a lovely one from your Uncle Vanya, hashtag Bulgarian Mums Rule, which I love. Which is very cool. We have so many tasting notes. Please keep them coming in because I love reading them. And if we can't read them all out, we'll still read them back, of course. But I think we should get on with this. So, pomegranate wine. Yes, there's a bottle. And it's the Apex collection, which I think...
the Apex, yeah. The Apex is a small batches and, our way of crazy thinking. So the Dead Sea is going to be in this series, or we even have cognac, orange wines, tequila, whatever. Oh, wow. We don't say no to any cask because... If not, we're going to drink it. If it's not going to be okay. So pomegranate for us is, when I was looking for an Israeli DNA, if you asked me earlier, what's my role at the distillery? Mm-hmm. So I'm in charge of I'm the VP of international sales. But because we are a small distillery and I came from the whiskey industry, so we do everything together. And sometimes Tomer is listening. He's very talented. He's a blender. He came highly commended now as the master distiller and a blender at the World Whiskey Award. And we were looking for something that is another just our step, our footprint or something like that. And pomegranates are something that is very, very Israeli. We eat a lot of pomegranates in every salad. We drink pomegranate juice. Even in the Jewish New Year's, it's one of the customs is to eat pomegranate seeds. And there is an Israeli winery that they make wines only from pomegranate wines, pomegranate fruit. And they have their own variety. It's up in the Upper Galilee. Actually, it was snowing 3 weeks ago. Upper Galilee. I was in London. It was sunny, or two weeks ago, and it was snowing there.
That's so unexpected. What a difference in weather.
Oh, it's crazy. Now today it was 35, so I don't know. It's so it was great, and they have their own variety. And when it's ripe, it's 1 kilo and 1.6 kilo, something like that. So it's a big pomegranate. They're making wines out of it, and we are just taking their casks. So the whiskey we're actually tasting was a finish. It wasn't a full maturation. We just launched one that is a fully matured in the pomegranate cask. But again, finish for us was 8 or 10 months finish, almost like 3 years in Scotland, because it's a lot. And it was during the summer, so it's even more. And I was just hoping that the idea was going to be great as in taste. And the first guys that actually believed in us were Boutique, and they bought. They call it the Boutique Malt Company because it wasn't a whiskey back then.
Too young, of course.
Pomegranate one. So this is a 3-year-old. It's 59 point something, and I hope it's different. So I hope you enjoy it.
It's amazing. Cheers. I'm going to have a little taste and then read out some more tasting notes. My goodness, this is amazing. I love the texture. It's so bold and mouth-coating and rich. That's so fascinating in a really brilliant way.
And I think that you get the balance between the sweetness and a bit of sourness, which is balanced with the sweetness or some tartiness, because this is the pomegranate.
It is, and you really get an impression of it. But I think there's a lot else going on. I'm getting some real spices, like vanilla pods. You do really get the oak as well as the pomegranate, which is kind of what you want, I guess. And was the whiskey pre-finished, matured in ex-bourbon casks?
Yeah, so it was almost like 2 years in ex-bourbon, and then it was aged in like 400 liters pomegranate wine cask. So we actually had to fill every 2 casks into 1 cask, and it was a combination between rosé pomegranate wine and port style fortified sweet wine from pomegranate, but which is the best wine from my taste from the pomegranate, because it's sweet and sour, and it's really refreshing, and I know that it's very healthy. But so it's a healthy whiskey. Like the Dead Sea is good for your skin.
I love it. We may not be able to make any health claims, but I like it. Pomegranate is definitely delicious and good. We've got so many more tasting notes coming in. So Sean McCarrick, I get orange and ginger on the palate, finishing with a chili heat. David Stanton's getting juicy dried figs, spicy sour herbs. We've got DS007, juicy and very spicy. Oh, I completely agree. Ian Jambarain, orange starburst on the palate. That's such a hit. TACD says a drop of water really brings out the fruit sweetness. And I really would suggest adding just a few drops of water, see what happens. You go slowly though, because you can add more in, but you can't take it out, as I often say. We've got P. Burrett, lots of flavor with spices and chocolate. Great dram. Chris Randall, really nice length, buttery and woody. I know what you mean. It does have like a buttery richness towards the end. And then Joe F says, this is the first wine cask whiskey that I've ever enjoyed. Thank you for sharing it with us, Pour and Sip, which is fabulous. And I've got a question that I want to put to you, Tal, from Real Boinga. Thank you for this. This is really, really interesting, and it'd be great to get your point. So this is about how whiskey tastes rather than maturation. Does the whiskey end up tasting different in different climates? There were drinks that I just didn't like when I was living in the tropics and then liked again when I was back up north. So it'd be really interesting to get your take on that, even if it's just anecdotally in your experience.
Well, it's the same whiskey in different...
Yeah.
I can tell you that it tastes different than the Dead Sea. Usually because it's too hot there, so you just don't want to drink whiskey. But it tastes different. It's like when you're tasting wine in a plane.
Yes, I was about to say, I feel like that is the time that I've experienced it most. And that's pressure and also noise, maybe, I think. It just tastes, everything tastes a bit flatter, a bit duller.
At the plane, if you taste the food of the plane that you serve on the plane, just on Earth, it's going to be much more, I think, salty and probably all kinds of sulfates inside, because you taste 35% less when you're up there, because it's so dry and because of the air pressure. So this is why you always get, you need to pick your wines there, but we're not, it's not our problem, the airliners. But I guess at the Dead Sea is different, because when it's so low, again, you feel more spiciness there and more sweetness. Everything is like kind of extreme there, even if you just taste the classic for us, their opening level, which is made only in Tel Aviv. And it's the difference. Now we have some new warehouses, and we're going to check that as well. We have one on the mountains of Jerusalem, which is 750 meters above sea level.
Yeah.
Which it's just 45 minutes up, you're in Mount of Jerusalem, and then another hour, you're down at more than a mile.
Yeah.
And then we have one at the next to the Sea of Galilee, which is so different than the Dead Sea because it's sweet water, still minus 200 meters, but very humid. Unlike the Dead Sea, which is very dry. So we're going to play. We're going to see what's that. And of course, we're going to taste some whiskeys next to the cask. So I'll tell you next time. I'll tell you the difference. But I know in the Dead Sea, you taste different.
Amazing. I need a full report. I want to know about the casks and how they taste all the different places, which is amazing.
You have to taste a pomegranate single cask from the Dead Sea.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, I think that would be very intense, but very amazing. Jeff's just put a really amusing comment. We'll just have to drink 35% more when I fly, which is, I mean, yeah, could be an interesting outcome, but I like it.
Kind of a compensation, yeah.
Definitely. Tal, one last question before we have to move on. What's next for M&H Distillery? Like, this whiskey is absolutely delicious, and the Apex series sounds so fascinating. What's coming next, whether in terms of like distillery news, production, or new releases? What can you tell us?
New releases, it's all the time. Apex series is never going to be the same. So we had 2 editions of Dead Sea, different casks. We had a new pomegranate, which is on its way to the UK, which is a fully matured in pomegranate. But then we just launched. We're out launching. For us, next week it's Passover, so we're not allowed to work for 1 week because it's grains. But then we're going to have single cask Apex, which Tomer and me going to pick, just a single cask. Even if it's just, we have a beautiful one, which is a 10-year-old Muscat, and we just aged whiskey in that one. And then we have a lot of ideas. We have some beer casks. We just launched, we call it Art and Crafts. Yeah. Arts and Crafts, which the first edition is going to be chocolate porter and IPA. So 2 different. And then this year we're still going to have some Amarone tequila orange wine, which is a kind of a funky, very funky, something between, not really oranges, but white wine, and some Pinot de Charente and some, I don't know.
Lots of things, my goodness, and so much flavor packed in. I need to come back and taste everything. This needs to happen.
No, you're welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for talking about this. Whiskey is an actual dream, and I don't think I've ever come across anything else like it. Pomegranate wine cask whiskey. It's beautiful. I'm just going to bring Andy back in. Here he is. Andy, what did you make of the pomegranate wine whiskey?
I absolutely loved it. Really, really bold, big and bold stuff. I would love to try that one fully matured in the pomegranate cask. That sounds incredible.
We'll have to try and like squeeze it into the next box so that we can do a comparison, although I don't expect anyone to save it. And Tal, my passing remark, I bet you had a great time sourcing those beer casks, because if I remember lots about you is that you love your beer.
You remember that.
I do, of course. Amazing. Thank you so much, Tal. It's been such a pleasure to catch up, and thank you for telling us all about the distillery and all about the dram.
And you're welcome in Tel Aviv, guys. Cheers.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. If you can hang around, join us at the end. If not, we'll catch up soon. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that.
Have we started with a 59.5% ABV whiskey before?
I don't think we have. I mean, we've started bold. We're coming in hot.
Coming in very, very hot.
Amazing. I loved that. I mean, as everyone will know, we're obsessed with flavor. We're obsessed with food. I feel like there's so much foodiness in that whiskey. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Great
Definitely.
stuff.
Shall we move on to a very different part of the world? So we started off in Israel. Now we're going to track quite far north.
I might take my jumper actually on now, because we're coming out of Israel into freezing cold Finland.
Into freezing cold Finland. Although when I was to Finland, also in June, I think, it was actually quite warm, very pleasant, 24 degrees.
Okay, well, there you go.
But
that's not Tel Aviv warm though, is it?
No, not Tel Aviv warm. But on that note, speaking of Finland, let's bring in Dave Worthington, our second guest for the night. Hello, Dave. How are you doing?
Good evening. Yeah, fine and dandy, thanks. Yeah, just enjoying. I didn't have any of the current pomegranate wine, but I was sipping along with our 1-year-old pomegranate wine cask, which is I just visiting it for the first time for a little while. So yes, that's rather good.
Yes, it's gorgeous, isn't it? Really, really good. Yeah. I think that's what I tasted when I went to Tel Aviv. It was just under a year or about a year, but yeah, full of flavour and amazing.
It's very good, yeah.
Yes.
It just reminded me to get another bottle.
More, the more the merrier. I am going to leave you in Andy's very capable hands, but I'm going to sip along to some Finnish whiskey this time. So I'll catch you in a bit.
See you later, Christy. Bye-bye.
See you in a bit.
How's it going, Dave?
Yeah, all fine and dandy. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just enjoying the whiskies. Yeah, it's been busy. It's been busy recently. We I was just down in London actually, just Tuesday evening doing a whiskey tasting. Not one Scotch whiskey in the lineup of 6 with the Soho Whiskey Club. So yeah, it's been going rather well. Lots of good things going on with boutique whiskey.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk all things boutique whiskey, but first, tell us a bit about yourself, Dave, and how you found yourself in your position of global ambassador for Boutique Whiskey Company.
Oh, I mean, that's a really long story that I've told thousands of times before. Yeah, my background is engineering. Originally a shipbuilder apprenticeship a long time ago. I ended up yacht building, and in it, when the sort of marine, the global financial crash in 2008 sort of killed the marine industry at that time, and I ended up back in heavy engineering. And whiskey was a hobby, a passion, much like yourselves. You just get into it, and it just starts to take over your life. I started a whiskey blog, started writing about whiskey. Started a whiskey club, hosting tastings, working at whiskey shows wherever I could, basically volunteering originally and then getting paid in bottles, and eventually standing in. And then I was standing in for Boutique Whiskey on a part-time basis throughout 2016, and halfway through the year, basically, they said, "How would you like to do this full-time, Dave?"
Yes,
I
please.
said, no, seriously. I said, "Are you serious?" I just never thought about moving full time into talking about whiskey for a living. It just wasn't. It was just my hobby and my passion. When my kids turned around and said, "Are you mad, Dad? Why haven't you resigned yet?" And so I did, and I haven't looked back, to be honest. I mean, I absolutely love what I do as a whiskey enthusiast, a geek. I mean, it really did take over my life when I first started getting into it. I guess, we're all a little bit on the spectrum. I'm passionate about lots of things that I do. Wherever I've done them, I'm very, very passionate and really go into them full steam ahead.
No half measures here.
No half measures. And to work for an independent bottler like Boutique Whiskey that has bottled whiskey from right around the world, as well as all of most of the distilleries of Scotland, it's just fascinating that I have to learn and understand a little bit about each of the distilleries that we bottled, and there are over 200 labels. Wow. Boutique whiskey labels now. Some of them will be blends, some of them will be secret distilleries. But I always go on about this 95 single malt distilleries of Scotland. That's the established ones, everything older than Kilhoman. And we've bottled 78 of them to date. Now, some of them we can't name, and some of them have definitely been teaspooned malts, but we've bottled those distilleries. We've bottled 6 of the 7.
It's like Pokemon. It's like Pokemon for you, isn't it? You've really got to catch
it. It is a little bit like Pokemon. Yeah, you've got to collect them all. There are those outstanding distilleries, yes, and they are all outstanding. I would love to have them checked off. Some of them are going to be easy, some of them are going to be impossible.
Yeah.
There are definitely some distilleries that we don't, it'd be very, very difficult to get a cask out of.
Sure.
But we bottled some of the new ones, all of the old Scottish grain distilleries, closed distilleries, but then distilleries from right around the world, from New Zealand to Australia to Japan, Taiwan, over to the States with rye, bourbons, corns, American whiskey.
Weren't you working with balcones as well originally?
Yes, I did my first ever whiskey show. I say worked.
Volunteer.
I was pouring and pretending to. I was like the baby Chip Tate at the time. While Chip went and did his things. Yes, I basically worked for two whiskey lives in London with Chip in the early days of Balcones. Yeah, he was the one I sort of cut my teeth as standing behind the other side of the counter.
Awesome stuff. So for those who don't know about the Boutique Whiskey Company, talk to us, when was it set up and what's the kind of the ethos behind it? Because obviously you've got these incredible labels, which are absolutely amazing, obviously. There's this kind of notion to kind of be disruptive as well within the independent bottling community.
We want people to drink, open the bottles and drink them. We never wanted to be collectible. I mean, we have become a little bit collectible because of the labels, as artwork, and some of the distilleries we bottled, long closed distilleries, and people want to put them on the shelves. That's fair enough. Absolutely. We were founded in 2012, so we will be celebrating our 10th birthday this year. There's lots of great stuff going on this year. There's loads of new labels coming through. The same artist has done every single label with us. Emily Chappell is her name. She's a freelance illustrator. She lives in our heads now. Or we live in her head, because we just have to give her a brief and she just nails it every time. We give her a few ideas and she comes back with a pencil sketch. It really is fascinating seeing how the label comes together. We've got another lot of new labels coming out in our next release, and some really special ones that are coming up for our birthday releases coming ahead. So that's one thing. What's our ethos? Really about bottling great whiskey wherever it is. I mean, right from the start, certainly on my own whiskey journey, you become sort of blinking and say, I'm only going to do single malts. And I went through every single malt that I could grab my hands on in that first year of whiskey discovery. And I thought, well, there must be a book. There must be a book, 101 dram whiskies before you die. Fortunately, there was, and the very first edition. And I opened that and thought there was blends, there was other whiskies in there, and I thought, well, I've got to do it. And that opened my eyes up to this world of whiskey. And Boutique was already there in this world of whiskey. I think we bottled our first Scotch in 2014. Okay. Just 2 years after we were founded.
So that's cool. So, I mean, amazingly, I think it's the same with Pour and Sip as well. Like, so many people have come into this with this kind of idea of like single malt Scotch, but had their eyes opened and their taste buds open to all these completely whiskies from all over the world, blended whiskies, all sorts of different types of whiskies. So it's amazing to go on these kinds of journeys when you have that kind of initial snobbery as well, sometimes, as it possibly is, as some of the Pour and Sip members have admitted to, and then had their eyes opened to kind of blended whiskey as well, world whiskey, younger whiskey as well, because we have this kind of horrible snobbiness about that's kind of dying out a bit about whiskey needing to be older, and that's all kind of out at the moment, which is a good thing, but that's also because of all these things, because of places people like the Boutique Whiskey Company.
I won't get on my soapbox, but I'm really passionate about whiskey is being made at the distillery, whereas if you read all the rules, it's made in the warehouse, because you can't call it whiskey until it's been 3 years old in wood. Sure. Which means what they're making at the distillery ain't whiskey.
Yes, absolutely.
Because when we bottle it, we have to call it a 1 year old.
Yeah.
You put that in a blind tasting, you would not be able to say that was a 1 year old. That's what really annoys me. And it all goes back to the Immature Spirits Act of 1915. And it's about time it's repealed. And I've been standing on that soapbox for a little while, but I'll stop right there.
We need people like you. But right, so let's move on to this whiskey that we're trying today. I'm really excited about this one because I've never tried anything from Finland before whiskey. So open our eyes. Teerenpeli Distillery. Talk to us.
Teerenpeli. Well, we bottled 3 distilleries from Finland very recently. A couple of rye whiskey. Sorry?
Kyrö Distillery was Finland.
Kyrö rye, Helsinki rye, and Teerenpeli single malt. And I have really been blown away by the quality of liquid that's coming out of Finland. I'm seriously blown away. I'm a huge rye whiskey lover. But Teerenpeli, this is a malt whiskey. It's a family-owned distillery that was founded in 2002 in the city of Lahti, which is just sort of northeast of Helsinki. So just not too far away from Helsinki, where Kyrö is right up the top in one of the fjords, I'm sure. They really are the largest distillery in Finland now, specializing in single malt. Rye is sort of a traditional crop in Finland. So the distilleries have been making, Kyrö and Helsinki have been making rye whiskey, but Teerenpeli make a single malt whiskey. Now, they use traditional pot stills from Scotland, so they're very, very much a sort of a Scottish style of whiskey. The original Teerenpeli distillery was actually founded within a restaurant, inside the Teerenpeli restaurant. Because of the alcohol laws and licensing laws about where you put distilleries, and it had to be associated with the food. And so the original distillery was actually within the restaurant, and they've actually grown that since. I think in 2015, the brand new distillery, not far from, just 10 minutes from the city centre of Lahti, so it's only 10 minutes away. Okay. But it is a much, much bigger distillery that can do a total capacity, I think, just over 100,000 litres of pure spirit a year. So tiny by comparison to most of the Scottish giants, but it is a single malt distillery, 100% malted barley. Traditional pot stills in a very, very, very Scottish sort of way. Most of their spirit is matured in oak casks, ex-bourbon, ex-sherry. And this one here, this was our very, very first batch from Teerenpeli. We've just released a second batch, actually. This is 5 years old. I think this one is at 47.6% ABV.
It sure is.
It's full maturation in a Spanish sherry cask.
Yeah.
Oloroso, it just brings out those big, bold, darker flavors. And I've never been a big chocolate lover, but I've really got into some really good quality chocolate with these sort of whiskies. Now, I've just put on my desk some Peruvian dark chocolate, which is 60% cocoa, and it's working absolutely beautiful. That's a fair trade bar of Peruvian.
Amazing.
60%.
I mean, we love a chocolate pairing or a food pairing or a cheese pairing on Pour and Sip. So
now
please,
the last time I did it with some Madagascan, which is a little bit higher at 70%, which was delicious too. But I thought,
so with a big cherry jam, you want a kind of high percentage cocoa, kind of dark chocolate.
You want some quality chocolate. I like going for these independent countries, sort of fair trade chocolate bottling releases, and just let a little tiny drop.
Now I'm just jealous I don't have the chocolate with me. I just feel like I'm lacking something now.
I did tweet earlier, don't forget, go and get your chocolate now, because I thought these were all wine cask whiskies, and I thought it would go well.
Great. I mean, this is huge on the nose, and I mean, the sherry is so bad. I mean, for me, it's just so jammy as well. Like, not jammy as in lucky. It's just this huge, huge jam, kind of dark raspberry jam notes as well. That's kind of really, really kind of there, basically.
It is really rich and fruity with this sort of distinct nuttiness on the nose. Lots of fruit cake, lots of candied fruits. There's hints of burnt sugar. Just those little spices of cinnamon coming through, and licorice, which is root licorice, which I really love.
I want to just read out a few of these tastings because I've not read anyone's comments out because we've been chatting away. Ian Jambo Rain, Davey, you are a shadow of your former self. Great work. Stuart McGregor. Stuart McGregor, this one has a waxy paraffin nose, but not unpleasant. Joe F, the thick vanilla and honey cake mixture on the nose with this one. Very sweet. Sean McCarrick, the Teerenpeli is vanilla fudge on steroids on the nose. Stuart Pilling, loads of vanilla on the nose. Reed getting burnt sugar and butterscotch on the nose this one. Anthony Mullins, the vanilla has hit me just by pouring it. Nikolai saying no hat today, Dave.
I didn't put a hat on. They're all hanging up here on the side there, and here, and round the corner. But yeah, I'm in the market for a new hat, absolutely.
Johan Corbagno, interesting. Burnt sugar-coated popcorn. Stuart McGregor, dare I say it smells green. Jeffster, just to be the first, I like the finish on this. Jeffster, I'm sorry. Get out. No, that's very, very good. Very good, Jeffster. David Stanton, nose, sweet toffee, banana spices, hay, moonshine, fruity, citrus, great nose. Malcolm Tucker, the nose on this Teerenpeli is lovely. It reminds me of Thornton's dark toffee drizzled in chocolate with hints of vanilla. Have you tried this before, Thornton's dark chocolate with toffee? Sounds amazing, I've got to say. Pat Cowling, black treacle, TACD. Oh, this smells delicious. All marshmallow and fudge treats. Yoza Hughes, candied peels, melted butter, fruit nose. Mikhail Baghama, interesting looking color. I mean, the color is really classic of a fully matured sherry Oloroso cask.
Yeah, and just 5 years old. Now, why just 5 years old in Finland? Well, the casks are actually matured in 40-foot ex-reefer sea containers. So this is our warehouse, our sea containers. They sit outside the distillery with no heating or cooling, and outside temperatures vary wildly throughout the year from minus 35 degrees centigrade to an occasional plus 30 degrees centigrade. So that's huge contraction, expansion, and this conversation, this, you know, the spirit and the wood talking to each other throughout those 5 years. It's obviously doing something. I forgot to add that all of this is Finnish malt, so grown no more than 150 kilometers away from the distillery site. This is a single cask, obviously, just 376 bottles of it. And our label.
Yeah.
You get
So
a bottle of this.
Pat Cowling's asking, what's a teaspoon malt? That you mentioned that earlier.
Well, that's teaspoon is a very, very Scotch thing. Scotch whiskey brought up on the back of blended whiskies. Teaspooning is what certain distilleries do to protect their brand. They will sell. Nearly all distilleries make fillings, what's known as fillings in the industry. So casks that are going off for blending. So all your blended Scotch whiskies. And some distilleries will cask them as what's known as a teaspooned malt, which means whoever buys it, they have trade names. Whoever buys that cask, they could release it as a whiskey in its own right, but they could never release it as a single malt. Teaspooned means it's a cask of one distillery with a mug full of another distillery's spirit within it. So now it's a blended malt, but it has all the characteristics of the original donor distillery. And just that one little teaspoon of another whiskey means it's now a blended malt and can only ever be bottled as a blended malt and sold as a blended malt.
There you go, Pat Cowling. That has definitely answered your question. No more questions needed. You were just about to show us the label, Dave, on this one.
I've got the label there. I'll put it up in front of the camera there. All of our labels tell stories. Every label tells a story. This is the Teerenpeli label. It will always be the Teerenpeli label. The difference between each batch, there'll be one or two little differences within the label. It's a sort of a Where's Wally game. So the labels are not identical. You'll look at it and think, I've tasted that one before, but was it that batch or the next batch or the batch after? Well, Teerenpeli translates to flirtation from Teerenpeli to English, flirtation, but it also means black grouse. So we've made sure there's a reference to both on the label. We have the original distillery within one of the shipping containers. There's a row of shops at the back of the label, which are all shipping containers. One of them's a restaurant called the Flirty Bird, I think it's called, sort of a reference to both flirtation and black grouse. Sure. We've got the sales and marketing manager, Yari Mami, driving a Zamboni because they're hugely into ice hockey up there. So a Zamboni is the tractor that sort of flattens the ice after on the ice rink. And there's loads of little shipping container businesses there. And we've got the little black grouse flirting in the snow there, and they've all got mohawks, really, because Jerry is currently sporting a mohawk. So we just thought we'd put mohawks on all the little black grouse. And there's a few little things in there. Sin Bin is a reference to their ice hockey team, the Pelicans. And then we've got a little whiskey shop on the end, which I think it's Casking for a Friend, it's called, of this one, referencing their warehouse.
If you like the look of that label and you like the taste of this whiskey, don't forget you can go to the Pour and Sip shop where you will get your members discount on this particular whiskey. So Dave, you were just talking about the weather fluctuations there. How does that affect the maturation process? Because this is 5 years old. Are we looking at a quicker maturation process in that period of time due to these fluctuations?
Well, that's what happened, in Scotland in a traditional dunnage warehouse. Temperature and humidity stays pretty similar throughout the year. So there's very, very little fluctuation in a Scottish traditional dunnage warehouse, thick stone walls, slate roofs, 3 high, dirt floors. You go into a dunnage in the height of summer in Scotland and it's still quite cool and damp in there. And you go in there in the winter, out of the wind, and all of a sudden it feels quite warm and damp in there. So it's very, very stable, and it's a slow maturation. Some of these bigger warehouses in Scotland where they're palletizing them, they are noticing difference between the top of the warehouse and the bottom of the warehouse. And this is really amplified when you go to places like Kentucky and Tennessee, where you have these wick houses. So they're huge wick houses with the different heights, and you can play, or distillers and blenders will play around by moving these casks. They know where the sweet spots are for maturation at different times of the maturation period. Different years will mature faster because of the temperature fluctuations from very, very cold in the winter to very, very hot in the summer. And that was certainly something I learned from balconies. When you think of Texan summers, very, very hot. But did you know Texan winters are very, very cold? I didn't. And they have this contraction and expansion of the wood, the pores opening up of the wood, which allows the spirit in there to interact with the wood, which is all the maturation. Why we mature in oak is because of this spirit interacting with the oak. It's adding and subtracting. It's losing alcohol or water through the timbers. It's oxidizing. Oxygen's coming in, and you get more oxidation with this contraction and retraction of the wood.
Super interesting. I've just been told that we are looking at the time and it is getting ahead of us. Just 3 more notes that I wanted to just read. There's loads and so many tasting notes coming out about this. Sean McCarrick, liquid toffee eclairs. Jeffster, it's the sweetness of this that really makes it stand out. Reverend Kevin Wright is certainly leaving a long lingering oaky note after this. And green tea is green. It's just had a bit of green and blacks, 85% dark chocolate, and a sip of Teerenpeli. Gorgeous. There you go. So I think I'll invite Christy back on, just looking at that time getting ahead of us.
He read the memo and brought the chocolate in.
Yeah, exactly. Christy's ears would have been getting a bit hot there, thinking about the chocolate and the food pairings.
I know, honestly, like I really need to learn to eat dinner before we do pour and sip, because it gets to this point and anyone mentions food and I'm like, I need it.
Doesn't help when I get to bring on chocolate though. I mean,
I know, actual real chocolate. Like Dave, you're like, oh, you're just making it very, very challenging not to go and get a snack.
Well, I did send a memo out about 2 hours ago. Don't forget the chocolate on Twitter. If you follow me on social media on Twitter, I told everyone to get the chocolate in because I knew there was 3 big whiskies that would work well with some chocolate. So
to be fair, you gave us fair warning. You gave us fair warning.
Very fair warning.
Well, thanks so much, Dave. It was really, really fascinating. I share your fascination and love for Finnish spirits producers. I think it was a wonderful tasting, and thank you so much for coming to join us and telling us all about it.
Lovely to see you all, and I'll see you again at the end.
Yeah, do hang out, and we will continue our drams, which will be great. Catch you in a bit.
Catch you in a bit, Dave.
Cheers.
Oh my gosh, this happens very often when we have 3 guests, because I feel like all of them we could happily chat to for hours on end.
You shouldn't feel so bad cutting them off.
I know, I hate it. I really do. I'm like, right, we all need to get in one place and just dram for about 8 hours. That's just what needs to happen.
Ian Jumbo Range just said the only chocolate in his house is a curly whirly. Will that work?
Bring on the curly whirly, I say. I think it sounds amazing.
Yes.
But I think it's time for our 3rd and final guest. Another Dave, just to cause confusion. Let's bring him in. We're going all the way over to Canada this time, but to actual Canada. He joins us from the other side of the world, which is very exciting. Hi there, Dave. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we've got 3 mega flavors and whiskies this evening, and yours is very much part of that lineup, and I'm so excited to hear all about it. So thank you for sharing all these things with us.
My pleasure. And I mean, this is a great, with the difference in time, this is a great way for me to spend the afternoon. I can avoid emails. It's only 3 p.m. here.
Okay.
I like it. A 3 o'clock dram. I have to say, it's 3 o'clock.
Keep talking. I don't have to read any emails. Keep going.
Exactly. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, I could have used a dram, so I'm quite jealous. But there we go. Andy, do dram along, and we'll catch you again in a bit.
I will do. See you soon. Have fun.
See you later. So I've got this dram in front of me, and it smells amazing, but I'm going to try and resist it for a moment and have a chat about you. Now, tell us a bit about you and Pike Creek and your involvement in everything, and bring us up to speed about your whiskey journey.
Yeah, I mean, I realize we're precious on time now, so I'll make it as quick.
No, we're good to go. We're good to go. We want to hear everything.
Well, I mean, I've been with the company for 8 years now as their global brand ambassador. Previous to that, I spent 20 years of my life making drinks behind a bar, and 15 of those years owning and operating a few different bars here in Toronto, and spent a lot of time in the cocktail world and working with different brands and whiskeys. And essentially, Corby Spirit and Wine, who I work for, approached me 8 years ago to maybe do a part-time ambassadorship to talk about Canadian whiskey, because I think it's one of the world's most under spirit whiskey categories.
Yeah, definitely.
And I thought it was a great idea. And long story short, it became such a challenge that probably 5 years ago, I sold the last 2 restaurants and came on full time. And we went from one country to being sold in 20 around the world. And it has been an amazing journey up until now. And it's looking forward to it to continue on.
Yeah, we were chatting earlier and you said you're about to be unleashed on the world again, which is very exciting.
I'm back out next week. So it's been as for everyone, it's been a long 2 years, but I'm very excited to get back out and see all the lovely faces and remind them about our expressions of Canadian whiskey and all the beautiful things about it. As I was saying, I feel it's fairly misunderstood category, but yet we're sold in 170 countries around the world. The category is, second highest category in the United States of America. We 24.1 million cases sold annually in the US. But yet most people don't know much about the category.
No, it's so true. Sorry, my girlfriend's cat has just appeared, so we may have an extra guest for Pour and Sip, but she may just leave us alone. I wanted to get your take on Canadian whiskey, because I understand that, and I completely agree with you, it's very kind of like misunderstood, underrepresented. People just don't get excited about it like they should. No. So can you give us a bit of an idea for anyone who maybe hasn't tried Canadian whiskey before? Like, what are like the legal definitions? Like, we have legal definitions for Scotch. Like, how do you define Canadian whiskey?
And I'm glad you asked it that way, because a lot of people I meet, especially in the US, because Canadian whiskey gets compared to American whiskey quite a bit. We both use a lot of corn and rye. And people often think there aren't rules and regulations with Canadian whiskey, which is not the case at all. To be called a Canadian whiskey, I mean, international law states we have to use cereal grains, so we use a lot of corn, rye, wheat, barley. We purchase at our distillery, Hiram Walker, where we've been producing our whiskey since 1857. So we've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
We purchase 100,000 metric tons of corn every year, 10,000 metric tons of rye, wheat, barley as well. And you must be fermented in Canada. And one thing to note, this is not law, but most Canadian producers keep all of their grains separate from the time they show up at the distillery until they are bottled.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the woman in charge of grain, our distiller, Amy, she's got her lovely, we call her the gatekeeper. Alice is the first person the grain meets. She has to make sure that all of it is up to quality. We buy locally from Ontario. And once she's approved of all the grain coming into the distillery, it goes into those 19 grain silos that hold 750 metric tons of each. Wow. It's a pretty impressive sight. And then they're all fermented separately. So the corn's fermented separately, about 72 hours. Then the small grains, the rye, the wheat, and the barley's fermented separately. And we have 39 fermentation tanks that are about 4 stories high and produce about 140,000 liters per day.
Wow. Okay, I have so many questions. I don't know where to start. My whiskey geek alarm has gone off, which is great. First of all, the grains. I imagine they all have very different, like, dream fermentation amounts of time and temperature and stuff like that. How do you manage that? Is it almost like having 4 separate distilleries, but you've got all the fermentation together, then all the distilling together?
There are, like, if you were to walk through the room where the 39 4-story tanks are, first of all, it's very warm, as you could imagine. And you'll always see 1 or 2 people, but everyone always comments, like, where is everyone? And I'm like, everything is monitored. The computer systems, yes, it's checked and people are always in there, but we're one of the largest distilleries in North America. So it's really automated and looked upon throughout the week from our distiller. Master blender will get involved. He oversees, our master blender, Dr. Don Livermore, oversees everything, but he's heads up all the blending at the end of the different expressions and the recipes we come up with. Another rule is you have to be distilled in Canada.
Yeah.
And we have the privilege of distilling any way we want. So a lot of our grains will be once column distilled, which leaves in all the grain flavors like the green grass, floral, soapy notes. But we also double column distill. And with that, first run, this is what Canada's kind of known for. First run takes away all the harsh qualities. Second run takes away a lot of the big grain and yeast flavor, and you're left with a very light styled, easy sipping whiskey, which is part of the expression we're having today. But we also pot distill, and sometimes we column and pot distill. So we've got 4 column stills right now. 2 of them are 5 stories high, and 55 million liters a year go through them.
Wow.
And we've got 4 pot stills. One's about 8,000 liters, and the other 3 are a little smaller than that. So they're tinier, more of our craft range. And finally, you have to be aged in Canada, which might sound normal, but when you're looking at North American laws, a lot of American whiskeys don't need to be aged in Canada. In Canada, we have to be aged in Canada for a minimum of 3 years in a barrel no larger than 700 liters, which is huge. Most of our barrels are 190 liters. We buy up a lot of ex-bourbon the same way Scotland and Ireland do.
Yeah.
But we also use new American oak, new French oak. We use all different types of sherry finish. Sauterne, Madeira, wine, tequila. It goes on because our master blender has that blank palate with that rule that he can age in any type of cask that he likes, which is really nice.
That is phenomenal. And I imagine, well, I know for a fact that some very experimental Scotch distillers look on to the rest of the world sometimes like, I want to get my hands on these like more unusual casks, which obviously they can now. It has been relaxed a bit since 2019, but it's not a blank canvas still. So yeah, that's very exciting. Pesho has asked a fantastic question. Are they all the different types of grains you've mentioned? Are they all fermented with the same yeast strain, or do you have different yeast strains to like get out those like, I don't know, grain specific characters?
Don has a few different yeast strains, but I'm going to say the enzymes, he uses pretty much the same enzymes for them. If he was here, he might give a bit of a different answer, but for the most part, yes.
Excellent. I love it. We've gone full chemistry geek. It's
what I was going to say, that's where we don't just nickname him Dr. Don. He does have a PhD in brewing and distilling from Harriet Watt.
Yes.
So if you had him talking about what wood does to whiskey today, you'd need about 3.5 hours with him.
And we'd probably also need a lie down afterwards, not from the whiskey, from the weight of knowledge.
He's pretty impressive. He's the scientist. I'm more of the actor that learns from the scientist, is what I always say.
No, I love it. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm learning so much just from the sort of 5 minutes or so that we've had chatting. I want to ask about the distillation as well. And we will get onto the whiskey, I promise. I did warn you I had very many questions. And it's always interesting to me. I'm not a Canadian whiskey expert, but I've learned about it a little bit over the years. And I feel like the real talent with any whiskey is the blending. And I feel like at the heart of Canadian whiskey, it's the blend, as you mentioned, of those column distillates and the pot distillates, obviously once they've been matured and they've become whiskey, I think. But could you tell us a little bit of the difference in character for anybody who's not sure or is quite new to distilling, like the difference in character between the column stills and the pot still whiskies?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as I was saying, so a lot of our rye, we once column distill. So obviously that takes away a lot of the harsh characteristics, but it leaves in all the grain. Like if it's rye, you're going to get the baking spices, rye bread. It leaves in the fruity, floral, green grass, and soapy characteristics. And that's almost a very American way of making rye. Now, as I was saying, most of our rye is done that way. Now, our corn, which is majority of what traditional Canadian whiskey is made up of, that's that double column distillation. So the first run again leaves all the grain flavor, green grass, soapy, floral, fruity notes, where the second one does strip it away and make it, some people call it a base whiskey, but that light, easy sipping whiskey, what Canadian whiskey is traditionally known for. For instance, the way that came to be was, without going into too much history, but with the Scottish and the English coming to Canada and teaching us how to distill and essentially make moonshine back in the early 1800s. It was that double column distillation that was created in 1846 at the Gooderham and Worts distillery, which is now it's downtown Toronto where it was. It was 1887. It was the largest distillery in the world because they started the double column distillation. And imagine if all you were drinking was moonshine at the time, and all of a sudden producers are putting out this light, easy sipping whiskey.
I mean, you'd be like, hallelujah, what is this? This is magic.
And that was kind of how, that style of Canadian whiskey started. Now, producers over the years, a little known fact, most people don't realize this. I certainly didn't until I started working with the company, but Canada being such a young country, where a lot of things had already been accomplished in the whiskey world. One thing that we did before anyone else legally was Canada mandated the law in the year 1870 that we had to age our whiskeys.
Okay. That I did not know.
Yeah, for 1 year, and then the law changed in 1890 where it was a minimum of 2 years. And I believe it was about 18 years later where Ireland and Scotland followed suit. So that's the little interesting point in aging whiskey in Canada. We were the first country to mandate the law, which is pretty cool. And it changed in the year 1974 to a minimum of 3 years.
Okay.
And now that's to be a Canadian whiskey, minimum 3 years is what it has to be.
I feel like you're the spiritual home of oak maturation then, which leads me to my next point before we actually get to taste it. I'm very aware that, I keep nosing, I'm desperate to taste. This is an ex-rum finish. Is it a finish or is it full maturation?
Ex-rum finish. So our warehouses, we have 16 warehouses that hold about 1.6 billion barrels. And these warehouses are in a part of town called Pike Creek. And
hence the name of the whiskey.
The whiskey, because it's the story of maturation. And as Dave and Tao were kind of talking about temperature fluctuations, same with us. We're the most southern tip of Canada, surrounded by the Great Lakes. So in the summer months, we go up to 35, 40 degrees Celsius, but we're still in Canada. So in the winter months, we'll go down to negative 25, negative 35 degrees, sometimes negative 40 degrees Celsius. And our barrels are in non-temperature controlled warehouses. So the temperature fluctuations go in the winter and the barrels are just tight, frost on the outside. This time of year right now, it's warming up. Spring is here. The sun's beating down on the warehouses. They're opening the doors. The warm air is coming in. And you'd walk into the warehouse this week, next week, and you would think that there was a leak in a barrel because the floors are soaked. But it's a condensation from the frost coming off of the barrels as they start to expand over the next 6 months. They're going to blow up. So when people look at our barrels, if you were to come over and visit, hopefully someday you will, the first comment people make are how rusty our hoops are. Some barrels
so
are
funny.
just covered in rust, just covered in rust. And that's from that climate change.
Yeah, my gosh. Yeah, this has made me think this is almost like not only are we like geography geeks with the whiskey for where they are, but in terms of like the climate and fluctuations and the impact of climate change on whiskey, I feel like that's a whole session we could go into separately. But I feel like we should drink some whiskey. We've talked about it. So talk us through this dram. We'll have a taste and then I'll read some tasting notes because they are coming in thick and fast.
I love it. Hopefully I can use some of them. That's the beauty of everyone having different notes. So Pike Creek is a very unique expression of Canadian whiskey. As I mentioned, traditional style is a majority of corn with just a little bit of rye added in. And that's what this is. Double column distilled corn, a few percentages of that once column distilled rye to add a little bit of the baking and spice notes. Aged in ex-bourbon casks for 10 years.
Yeah.
We get little subtle dry fruit, mature oak, autumn florals. And then we finish this for 100 days in rum casks from the Caribbean.
Ooh, amazing. Quick question from your Uncle Vanya. Which rum can we ask? We can always ask. Doesn't mean you're going to tell.
You can always ask. And we make a rum at the distillery called Lamb's Rum, which is very popular in Canada and the UK. These barrels come up from Guyana. And once we blend the Lamb's Rum, we put the whiskey into those barrels.
Amazing. That's so interesting, because I think if anyone knows, I mean, again, rum history, we could have like a whole nother session on this and all of the complications and tragedies of this. But Guyanese rum is very separate in style from, I think, like maybe rum from Jamaica or rum from, you know, Panama. Like, I think it's got its own sort of distinct feel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, tasting the whiskey before it goes in the rum, after the rum, you know, I'm getting like always a little bit of golden raisins, lots of brown sugar, some warming vanilla. It's a beautiful velvety round whiskey.
It is. Oh, I'm gonna have a taste. I've had a taste. I'm going in.
It's certainly the lightest and sweetest whiskey that we have in the portfolio. Noticing it's a sipper. We notice a lot of people just like it on its own, but also in the bar world, something that's happened naturally is in the summer months, warmer months, we see bartenders kind of doing tiki style with muddled up herbs and fruit. And then in the winter months, when it's colder, we're seeing a lot of like coffee and dessert cocktails they make with this, which makes perfect sense with that rum influence on it.
So this is amazing. So if anyone has any left, get out the cocktail shaker or stirrer. Go and get experimenting.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Let me go through some tasting notes and then we'll get everyone back. I don't understand where the time's gone this evening, but there we go. We move. Mikolai is already on it. I will say in advance, Pike Creek and Coke is the perfect combo. I honestly love mixing whiskey. Mixing whiskey is an absolute joy. We've got vanilla, caramel, light fruits, banana, rum from David Stanton, which is great. We've got rum, vanilla, and a bit of spice from Ian Jambo Rain. Yoza, very sweet vanilla, woody nose, beautiful. Sean McCarrick, rye comes through strongly, some sweetness and blackberries on the nose. I love that. We have so many. I'm just going to pick out some, but thank you so much for all of them, everyone. TACD have banoffee rum on the shelf, and this is really reminding me of that. Oh, that sounds like it's dessert time. It's dessert time. Reverend Kevin Wright, smooth and sweet palate. I get the maple syrup, inevitable, I guess, for Canada. I'd happily put this on creamy ice cream. Oh God, what is wrong with everyone? I'm just so hungry. We've got warming and smooth on the finish from DS007. We've got easy drinking, sipping whiskey, needs no water, very rounded and smooth from Clive Hampton. We've got James Hardy, sweet, nice sweet wryness to it. I agree with the old fashioned. So we go more mixing. Anthony Mullins, definitely a creamy taste. A nice sunny afternoon in the garden whiskey. I agree. Oh my goodness, can summer arrive now?
Love that.
I love it so much. Loads and loads and loads, which is brilliant. And I saw somebody else. Here we go, Jeff. We've got lots of people saying, giving their votes already for their drams, which is fantastic. So this has been amazing. My goodness, thank you so much for taking us through it and for also giving us a sneak peek, I guess, into the history of Canadian whiskey. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to return.
Amazing. And thank you for waiting for us to chat through for hours and hours on end.
It was really interesting. And I was a little envious I didn't have both of those whiskeys in front of me. So I can't wait to try them.
They were so good. I'm going to bring Andy back first of all, and then we'll get our panel together. So any final questions, get them in now for our panel when we have everyone back. Andy, how are you doing? Are you in the land of like the tropics, of like rum-tasticness?
I am. And that's the best thing I can say about the whiskey in your hand. Listening along. I absolutely loved that, by the way. And I went on the store. I can't believe the price point of that, if I'm completely honest.
And that's the thing. For a 10-year-old whiskey, people are usually surprised at the price point.
Absolutely insane. And it's such a stunning whiskey. So I think that's absolutely amazing. That's very rare that you see that. It was like a bit of a, whoa. So I highly advise you going and making the most of that in the pour and sip shop.
Do you go and check it out? Right, I'm going to bring back Tal and I'm going to bring back Dave. Here we are. Hello, our whiskey panel extraordinaire. How's everyone doing? All good, all good?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Christine, I feel like everyone is already answering that question. So
I know. Let's get straight to it. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's the first time this evening, and for our guests, Andy is very horrible at this point and asks the worst question possible, but I'll hand over to him.
Which one of our guests did you like the most? No. No. Which whiskey did you enjoy the most from tonight? That's the question for you tonight. Which one was the one that you enjoyed the most? So let us know in your comments, and we'll be reading those out.
Yeah, let us know. So I've got a question for each of our guests, which is one that we posed at the top of the hour, or hour and 15. I want to know your whiskey bar recommendations. Anywhere in the world, where have you drunk that has really delighted you? Where's been like your sweet spot? And I'll kick off while everyone's having a think. I really love, and I feel so lucky that I've been there a few times, the Old Alliance in Singapore. It is full of beautiful, like old sofas. It's like a library of whiskies, and you can have amazing, amazing drams by the glass. But I will also shout out my local whiskey bar around the corner in Brighton, Cut Your Wolf Loose. They're like, it's very different vibes, very modern, but very fun and really cute and teeny. So if you're in Brighton, do pop in. They're my 2 recommendations. What about you, Tal? Where are your favourite whiskey bars?
So I know, I love the one in Tel Aviv, the Whiskey Museum, which is underground. But I think the Golden Promise in Paris is a crazy one. You have all kinds of Kurosawa's rooms, and it's like a museum underground, and it's amazing.
It sounds phenomenal. Oh gosh, imagine walking down into it, almost like a Kurosawa cave of incredibleness. Sounds fantastic. Dave Worthington, how about you?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I've been to some incredible whiskey bars around the world. Certainly the ones in China that I were taken into were just unbelievable. But back home, where we all are, Cut Your Wolf Loose, I was down there doing a tasting just a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely loved this little bar. That's a great place to go and hang out. In Edinburgh, in Glasgow, the Pot Still, or the Bon Accord for sure. They're 2 must goes. If you go to Glasgow and you don't go to those 2 bars, then you haven't been to Glasgow. I'm sorry. There's quite a few in Edinburgh. In London, Milroy's obviously Melody. One of my favourite places in the world to hang out is the Soho Whiskey Club.
Amazing. And Dave M, our other Dave. What about you? Some top picks?
I was going to say, I'll try to hit this side of the world. I mean, it's hard to choose. One of the more jaw-dropping experiences would be Jack Rose in Washington, D.C. I just couldn't even believe that there was a room that large with so many bottles.
I have a masterclass there in 3 weeks, I think. So,
and the one thing that blew me away was the staff, because I was doing a staff training, and you could literally pick anything out of anything, and the staff would be able to tell you about it. Like, their memory was amazing. And then I would say here in Canada, and just because I was recently there, is in Vancouver, so over on the West Coast, there's a place called Fetz, and it's very impressive selection. It's not the largest I've ever seen, but I'd say there's probably 400 or 500 bottles. It's very impressive.
That sounds
small space, but crazy amount of bottles.
Sounds amazing. I'm making notes to plan my next holidays, by the way. Thanks, everyone. Got my itinerary is down.
You go where the best whiskey bars are, and the recommendations for the best whiskey bars are.
If there's not a distillery or whiskey bar, I'm not going. Andy, what about you? And then you can. I mean, there are so many notes coming through.
So in London, I said previously, the Melody whiskey bar is probably my favourite. One I went to recently was in Miami, actually. It was called the Warren Whiskey Bar. And oh my God, I don't know if anyone followed me on Instagram and they saw that video. Is honestly one of the most impressive whiskey selections I've ever seen. It was like a library and the whole restaurant was covered in it. It was absolutely incredible, and they had some amazing stuff there. So that was pretty awesome from one of my recent bars experiences. And obviously Milroy's as well in London. Black Rock's another great one in London, actually.
I second Black Rock for whiskey cocktails as well. If you do fancy a drop in a mixed drink, definitely check it out. Absolutely.
Right, I'm going to get into these. So Stuart McGregor for me, Milk and Honey, M&H, sorry, Teerenpeli, and then Pike Creek. Jeff said Teerenpeli gets his pounds this week. Chris Turner, Teerenpeli all the way. Neil Bolton, Teerenpeli wins for me. M&H close second. Jim Smith, Teerenpeli, my favourite this week. Green Tea is Green. Based on the fact that there's no Teerenpeli left in my glass, I think that might be the winner. Do like the Milk, the M&H though, and then the Pike Creek for the lightness, maybe a terrific spring summer dram. Sorry, one more question. Chris Dagnan was saying on the Pike Creek website, it was saying port finish, but you changed it, didn't you? It was port and then it's now rum.
It was in 2012 when it came out. Well, it came out in 1998 for a couple of years. It was port. 2012 it was port, and 2016 it changed over to rum. So yes,
Okay, cool. So there you have it. Reverend Kevin Wright, a great whiskey tour this evening. Yoza Hughes, for me tonight, is going to be the Pike Creek. Malcolm Tucker, the wallet is being looked for. Another expensive month. Green tea is green. I'd happily drink all three. Stuart McGregor, great tasting tonight. Love it. Mikhail Baghammer. Teerenpeli from the Deep Forest in Finland is my winner this evening. Malcolm Tucker, I have 3 empty glasses. Exactly. Sean McCarrick, M&H wins it for me. Bottle is on its way already, followed by the Pike Creek. Chris Randall, have to say the Teerenpeli is my favourite. Favourite this week. It's a very different dram. Stuart Pilling, Pike, then M&H, then Teerenpeli. Ian Jamboree and M&H just pips the Teerenpeli for me. A little more complexity to the M&H. Would like to spend some time with it. Joe, M&H wins. Gerard McNeely, Teerenpeli for me. Neil Bolton, Finland in capital letters. Pesho, M&H. Mikolai, been on the Pike Creek bandwagon since 2020. But Teerenpeli is amazing. Clive Hampton, Pike Creek for me, so I can imagine drinking it through a long evening. Malcolm Tucker, this month, Teerenpeli. Your Uncle Vanya loved each, very different. So credit to Pour and Sip again. Sean McCarrick is repeating the Bow Bar in Edinburgh as being a superb whiskey bar. Reverend Kevin Wright, I think if I had to choose, it would be the M&H. I've always been looking for something different, and this one ticks all the boxes. There are tons of comments. I'm not even sure I can get through all of these, Christy. If I'm
not sure we can. Yeah, but there's love for all 3 of them, which I personally love to see. We love to see it, and I think it's just been an absolute joy to chat to each of you 3 as well. I mean, there's so much whiskey love and whiskey knowledge and expertise on this call this evening. So thank you so much, all of you. It's been an absolute joy. My glasses are all empty, so yeah, I mean, winning on a Thursday, quite frankly, can't complain.
What better way to spend it? There were a few more. Oh, I've lost my page. Anyway, there were a few more whiskey bar recommendations, which I thought might have been worth to read out. But I've literally lost slack now. So.
Do you know what? I'm wondering if we might go back through the comments and put a little like crowdsourced list together. That might be quite fun. Jake, if you're watching, who's our behind the scenes man. There you go. That's your task for Friday. I think that'd be really fun.
We did that once, I think, with the Pour and Sip Digest, did we not? And we all recommended whiskey bars. So we should do the same for this one with all our guests as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just giving Jake work. I'm on
it. Yeah. Sorry, Jake. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, Dio.
Poor Jake.
Poor Jake. But yeah, I mean, just to wrap up again, thank you so much to our guests. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We have been inundated with your tasting notes and comments and questions. Thank you so much for all of them. It's an absolute joy to read them. We love it. And we love your feedback. We love knowing that you're enjoying the drams. And yeah, stay in touch with us all month long on social media as well. We'll be back. Let me check the date. 21st of April. We're going to hone in on Scotland for the last 2. So if you can resist your drams till then, please do. And what a treat this evening has been. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm chasing you with an almost empty glass. And thanks as well, Andy, obviously, as always.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We will see you on the 21st.